All right, hey, we're here in the ARS-TV Garage, and I've got two guests today. I've got Mike Ruth and Mark Pappas from the Midwest Nostalgia Pro Stock Association. And thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
It's always a good time in the ARS Garage. Your name's Mark? I didn't know that. Okay.
How you doing?
A pleasure.
So tell me about the organization and how it got started.
Well, I guess it started right around 2011. I saw a little glip in Good Guys magazine about Good Guys was coming out with a nostalgic pro stock deal to go along with their fuel class and junior fuel and such. And I mean, I was immediately geeked up on it, and I called Jeff Johnson, who was running it at the time, and got the rules. And I proceeded, that was like November, I think I saw that article, and January 1st, I finally found the car. You know, I searched for the right car. I had talked to David Rear about, you know, representing him, and he was totally on board, got the car, and following year, there was a race in Thompson, and Jeff Johnson said, oh, don't go yet, let's build momentum. And, you know, races kept coming up, and he said, let's sit this one out. Finally, we raced at Norwalk, which is a really good time, and we ran at Joliet. We went to Bowling Green, and I pulled in the gates of Bowling Green, and there were whisperings, good guys done, good guys done. I said, you know, so I went to Jeff Johnson. I said, all these people are telling me good guys are done. He goes, yeah, well, don't worry, next year I'll have a great deal. So 3 races in, build a car for a class, no class. So, you know, not waiting to see what Jeff Johnson would come up with, I came back home, and at the same time I was building a second car, a Grumpy Jenkins 81 Camaro Joe Lapone tribute car. So I decided, well, I'll book myself, I'll get some match races, and Bill Neary came aboard, and we came up with, I came up with the Midwest Nostalgic Pro Stock Association. Early days, it was a couple of us, joined, and then we really started getting some traction when we got guys like Ted Peters to join, and George Jungle Kubis. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but he'll never see this because he's, you know, no internet. But no, that was a good thing for him to come on, and you know, it kind of grew and grew to where it is today. And how I always knew who Mike Ruth was. You know, he was the big tuner up at Union Grove, and every now and then I'd wander over and ask him a question about my gasser car or something, and he always had time for me. He was good. And then it kind of evolved to where, you know, Mike helped me one day, and next thing I know, you know, he kind of took over the reins as my crew chief, and we were on a roll there until, you know, he called me one day. He says, I got an idea, come to your shop, and I think he's going to tell me about our new hot setup. And he throws something on the table and says, I'm driving again. Okay, so so that's how it really started. It started basically, Good Guys pulled the plug on it, okay. And you know, I kind of.
So this is an event group. It's not necessarily a series that you're running at this time. You're going to different events and being a part of whatever event they have going on. Is that correct?
We're basically an exhibition class,
okay.
and that's really what we do. We pair the cars up evenly. Basically, we're there just to give people a show and a good time, and let them remember the good old days of nostalgia, of pro stock.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, they're long gone in pro stock as compared to what it is today. I mean, pro stock has gone eons compared to what it was with, you know, the fuel injection now. I mean, you guys are running carburetors, and tell us about your car, Mike. What are you running?
It's a Ford Fairmont Bob Glidden car. It's fairly period correct. I mean, it's pretty much the way Bob had it. It was never one of Bob's cars. It's a tribute car.
Okay.
But our group, we try to keep them, you know, as close as they were back then. And you know, there's other groups out there. Some of them like to put, you know, great big engines and go real fast. You know, and the problem with that is, in our eyes, you need a bigger wing, you need a bigger hood scoop, you need bigger wheelie bars. And all of a sudden, it starts looking like a pro mod car. And that's really not what they were back then.
Okay.
So we're running the same kind of times as they ran back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I think we're on the right path because every weekend we're somewhere. You know, we're booked constantly. Okay. So it's all good.
Now, tell me about the Woodstock of Pro Stock. What is that about?
Jeff Rudisell and Tyrone Graham. Actually, Jeff Rudisell tells me the story. He picked up a YouTube video one day. He was watching some car run, and then the next clip up was a picture of my rear Morrison car somewhere up here in the Midwest, and he said, nostalgic pro stock. You know, he hadn't heard about Good Guys, and he is, like Mike and myself, a big pro stock fan. So he's watching this YouTube clip, and he calls his friend Tyrone. He says, you know, we can do this. At the time he was running Top Sportsman, and in the South it's big pro stock country. So fast forward, he built a Bill Ornsdorf car, and there was a lot of interest in the area, and last year was their inaugural one, and they did pretty well. And this year I think we had 24 cars out there.
Yeah.
And actually, I believe close to 20 were in competition. That was a race.
Oh, wow.
And back to our deal, I will say one thing. Like Mike said, we primarily match race, but we do have one race every year. It's called the Grumpy Cup. It's a Black Arrow Cup, actually is the technical name. And it's a tribute to Bill Grumpy Jenkins. And we run an 8-0.
Okay.
You know,
Index
8-0. No, it's flat out 8-0.
Oh.
8-0 or, you know, no faster than 8-0 or you're out.
Okay.
And we have an unlimited class.
Okay.
And we actually got rained out in the qualifying rounds at Cordova, and we are going to finish it this weekend in Joliet. So we do have one race, and the Woodstock of Pro Stock was the actual race as well.
Okay.
They did a great job. We hooked up with them, so we're kind of like brother groups, and we brought, I think, 6 or 7 cars. They did a fantastic job of organizing that, and it was incredible to see that many Nostalgia Pro Stocks, and they were all quality cars. I mean, it was amazing. They actually had 30 cars on the grounds. Some of them were just static display cars, and the rest of them ran. But there's a whole video, a 3-hour video that's out on it. It shows the parade lap and all the action, but there's just some really super nice and fast cars. So it was, so far this year, as far as races, that was one of the highlights for me, because it was awesome just seeing all these guys and all these different cars. And
Yeah, you run into people that have the same passion you have, and you know, you hear the rumors. Well, you know, they don't like what you're doing, and then when you really meet them on face value, you really realize they are, you know, as far as the racing, to us, the racing community, they are our brothers.
Yeah. And it's you know, and in the racing community, it's always good to see like-minded people working together to make things work, you know, especially at a track, because tracks are tough as it is to get everybody moving in the same direction. But speaking of that, what is in the future of Nostalgia Pro Stock?
it's growing. I mean, it's growing in leaps and bounds. We've had a tremendous amount of interest in our program this year. As you know, we were featured in a July issue of Hot Rod Magazine, and when we got 4 pages of color, and you know, that's every kid's dream
deal.
to be in. Telling you, man, Hot Rods, it doesn't get any bigger than that. And you know, from there, we've hit all the major events. You know, we've got this classic at Route 66 national event track. We're doing the Hot Rod Drag Week at 3 different tracks, and then
World Series.
And the World Series is coming up, which is back at Cordova this year, and you know, it looks to be as big as it's ever been, and so that's we're really thrilled that people are on board. We've landed some major sponsors this year. John from Power Master has helped us out tremendously.
Unbelievable. I can't say enough
JC
about John.
from Strange and Bob Stange and his son Jeff. I mean, really help us out a lot. And there's a bunch. Flat Out Gaskets. You know, Mark's a huge fan of our deal, and it's cool that we're starting to get some recognition and also some help, because we don't make a ton of money racing these things, and they're not like running a real pro stock, but you got to pay for 3 or 4 guys out there, your crew, and you're putting clutches in and rear ends. It's not cheap.
And hotels and gas and travel and everything else that goes along with a racing.
And the truth is, while Mike said that we don't necessarily have the big engines and go as fast as some of the groups would like to go out there, the fact is, our cars being period correct, I think we were at a races here, we had 8 cars, 7 of them had Lenkos. Okay, what's the significance of that? Well, that's that too, but there's a flip side of that. You know, you could have a bulletproof Power Glide built or a Turbo 400 and do major long burnouts and do all your stuff and make a run, come back, grab a cheeseburger, check your motor, and go back and do it again. You start talking about a clutch car and a Lenko car, there's a big learning curve in just driving them, and quite frankly, they're less forgiving. you make a bad run, you'd make a bad burnout, you're going to have an issue with the clutch. And as Mike says, it can be somewhat costly to run these cars.
Okay. All right.
We did it something different too. You know, Mark's, I don't want to put him on a spot here. He's a very successful businessman. He didn't get that where because he's lucky. And I ran a successful business for many years. I'm an analytical kind of guy, as you know. And we sat down and we didn't just shoot from the hip or do what we thought was best. We went around and talked to the promoters, talked to the organizers, talked to the track people. What do you want? What do the fans want? And that's why we tailored our to be where it is now. A lot of the events we do are nostalgia events. And they bring in nostalgia funny cars that run 660s to 680s. Well, if you show up with a door car that's running 690, you know, the crowds are like, well, wait a minute, this nitro car can only go this
Yeah, it kind of
fast?
steals the thunder.
It absolutely does. And people wonder why they're not getting booked. Well, you know, that could be one of the reasons.
Right.
We don't run nitrous. We don't run any you know, turbos or any of that
Power
stuff.
adders, yeah.
None of that at all.
Power additives. And I'll tell you two quick stories. My first year, I believe, we were still with Jeff Johnson, and I was kind of branching off by myself. He booked a weekend to where we started out in Marion County on a Friday and ended up in Columbus on Sunday. We ran Marion County, Ohio, Friday night and Saturday, and then we took off Saturday afternoon, drove to Columbus, stayed overnight, ran Columbus in the morning. And Columbus is owned by NHRA, and a guy named Layton, I believe it was Dave or Bill Layton, was the track manager, and track was seeping, so we weren't going to make another run. We went up to square up with him and talk to him, and I just kind of said, passing, what would you like to see next year, you know? And one of the fellows in the room with me that was match racing said, well, you know, we could bring some really, you know, fast, low 7-second cars, and he went like this, and he says, you know what I want to see? He said, I want to see dry hops, long smoky burnouts, staging games, and I want to hear you guys leave on a mat, and I want to hear, you know, second, third, fourth, and by the time you put the thing in fourth gear, he goes, I'll look at the stands, and he goes, I know it's successful if the people are looking to see, as you're crossing the finish line, no one's worried about what you did, they're worried about the next two cars coming up. And then I was fortunate enough to get, well, Mike did it with me as both a crew chief, using one of my, driving my grumpy car and his own car, the Hot Rod Reunion, which is a major event, you know, between Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They're estimated to get 90,000 people through the gate. And Steve Gibbs put it on, and I was fortunate enough to do it the last 5 years. Started out by myself, and then more guys got involved. And Steve, you know, every year I would thank Steve Gibbs, and did he like what he saw? And he was a big fan of it, and he's a nitro guy. And he said, Mark, just don't make the mistake. When I start, Steve pretty much started with the Nostalgia Funny cars. He said, don't get to the point where, you know, Daddy Warbucks buys a Alan Johnson or, you know, John Force motor and chassis and puts a 74 Mustang body on it. Because that's where he got, and what he had to end up doing was mandating the box they could use, mandating the blower drive they could use. And he said, you know, keep it in. And one of the things we try to do is, we don't per se put a limit on cubic inches, but what we encourage is, you know, everyone, there's nothing, and believe me, we're running some good cars now. We had a show the other day where, what, 3 cars in the 7s? And I mean, I'm not talking about 799. They were in the 7s, deep in the, solids in the 7s. And we did that pretty much period correct. What we like to do is, you know, period correct. So no, you know, big profiler heads or big chief heads or big spread bore motors. You know, of course you're going to use aftermarket blocks now because, let's face it, you're making 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower. You know, stuff's not, you're not going to have you know, the old 454 out of the Suburban just not going to cut it anymore.
Right.
So that's what we try to do.
All right. And so you've got more races throughout the rest of the year. We're in August already. This will be on our September edition. How late in the season are you actually running? When's your last?
We're actually negotiating some deals right now. We may go
deep in October.
Yeah, we may go that deep. And then, you know, right after that, the show season starts.
Yeah,
so as you know, we were at the Race and Performance Show. We've got a couple of them that we were booked into. A little bit premature to announce them just yet. But you know, this winter we'll have a lot of static displays where we hand out flyers and calendars, and you can get, you know, autographs from the drivers. You know, last year we were at the Milwaukee Auto Show in Motor Trend's booth.
You should see the crowd around his for the autograph session. Just saying.
So it's all year round, and like I said, we're getting calls constantly.
Well, we're big fans of the Midwest Nostalgia Pro Stock. We follow you on you know, everywhere you're going, really. With the social media and stuff today, we're happy that you're allowing us to be a part of your organization, and we can't wait to see you out at the tracks.
It'll be soon.
All right.
You're always welcome to come along. You know that.
All right.
You've done a good job promoting us.
All right.
You know, we quite frankly, this is what you do
Yeah.
for motorsports. You need us.
Right. Absolutely.
Guys like us, groups like us, and we are nothing without
Absolutely.
people like you.
Thank you.
It's,
We appreciate it.
It's very important.
All right.